If I told you there was one way in which you could improve your writing immediately, I think you'd probably bite my hand off. Well, the good news is there is. And it's a way that I use in the writing of my books, and it's a way I encourage my students, whether in workshops or in coaching sessions, to use as well. Now, in order to get into what that way is, I'm going to read an extract from a novel by J.K. Rowling called Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So let's look at this text together. Dobby shook his head. Then, without warning, he leapt up and started banging his head furiously on the window, shouting, "Bad Dobby! Bad Dobby!" "Don't! What are you doing?" Harry hissed, springing up and pulling Dobby back onto the bed. Hedwig had woken up with a particularly loud screech and was beating her wings wildly against the bars of her cage. "Dobby had to punish himself, sir," said the elf, who had gone slightly cross-eyed. "Dobby almost spoke ill of his family, sir." "Your family?" "The wizard family Dobby serves, sir. Dobby's is a house elf, bound to serve one house and one family forever." "Do they know you're here?" asked Harry curiously. Dobby shuddered. J.K. Rowling has a very bad habit, and that very bad habit is using too many adverbs. Now, adverbs are often described as words ending in ly, but actually, it's much more complicated than that. There are 4 different types of adverb, and we're going to have a quick look at those now. So the first type of adverb that you find are adverbs of manner. Quickly, gently, wildly, suddenly, loudly, rudely are examples, adverbs that describe how something is done. Then there are adverbs of degree, completely, entirely, extremely, strongly, absolutely, thoroughly. These describe the degree to which something is done. All those adverbs, please notice, end in ly, but not all adverbs end in ly. Look at adverbs of time: always, already, before, today, tomorrow, tonight. And then there are adverbs of place, which also don't tend to end in ly: above, behind, below, down, inside, outside. With that in mind, we're now going to return to Dobby and Harry in the Chamber of Secrets, and we're going to have a look at what kinds of adverbs J.K. Rowling uses and whether they're necessary at all. So I've highlighted the adverbs in the story of the exchange between Dobby here and Harry. Dobby shook his head, then without warning he leapt up and started banging his head furiously on the window. Furiously is a redundant word. It's an adverb that's not necessary in this context. Very often we use an adverb because we haven't used a strong enough verb. So I would have written, he leapt up and started bashing his head on the window, shouting, "Bad Dobby, bad Dobby," because bash contains the idea of furiously. We could go on. Hedwig had woken up with a particularly, don't need that, loud screech and was beating her wings wildly. Don't need that either because it's implied with the word beating. I would have used a stronger verb like flailing her wings against the bars of her cage. Dobby had to punish himself, sir, said the elf, who had gone slightly cross-eyed. I'd have crossed out slightly. Why? Because cross-eyed is cross-eyed. You can't have slightly cross-eyed or not slightly cross-eyed. It's cross-eyed or cross-eyed. And then, worst of all, "Do they know you're here?" asked Harry, curiously. Now, that's an example of tautology, saying the same thing twice, because the verb ask implies and includes curiosity. "Do they know you're here?" asked Harry is all that's necessary. So why are adverbs such dangerous things, and why is it so important to be ruthless in cutting them out when you come to self-editing your draft? I think there are 3 reasons that I want to stress. Because, first of all, they make your sentences too long. Adverbs are very often words of 2, 3, even 4 syllables. If you use a stronger verb, you can cut out the adverb, and that immediately will make your sentence much less long, much shorter. So adverbs are perilous because they make your sentences too long. Secondly, they make your sentences too slow. Adverbs have a tendency of slowing the pace, rhythm, and tempo of your sentences right down. They make your sentences feel clunky and ponderous, whereas actually what you want is for your sentences to flow smoothly and reasonably swiftly. And the third reason is because they make your sentences too weak. Very often what happens when authors, and especially inexperienced or amateurish authors, use adverbs, what happens is that they're telling the reader what they really should be showing the reader. Adverbs are kind of the narrator's way of intruding into the story and saying, hey, look, that person's acting frantically, whereas actually you need to show that rather than tell it. So those are three reasons why I think adverbs are dangerous and should be avoided. Now, the good news is that you can grow over time as a writer, and some of these things that in the early years you get wrong, you can get right by disciplining yourself through self-awareness and through personal restraint. Let's look at Stephen King, for example. Stephen King has this wonderful analogy in his book called On Writing, and it's an analogy for adverbs, comparing adverbs with dandelions. Let's look at that now together. Adverbs are like dandelions. If you have one on your lawn, it looks pretty and unique. If you fail to root it out, however, you find 5 the next day, 50 the day after that, and then your lawn is totally, completely, and profligately covered with dandelions. Now, that's a wonderful analogy. Look at it again, and you'll see in that last sentence some classic Stephen King irony, because in the very act of critiquing adverbs, he uses 3, totally, completely, and profligately. Those are adverbs of manner and degree. But also look at the date of his book, On Writing, 2000. The year 2000 is when On Writing was published. Why is that significant? It's significant because Stephen King learned over time to be very disciplined when it came to adverbs. In the early part of his career, he used a lot of adverbs, but after his book On Writing in 2000, he became a lot more restrained. He became a lot more focused on spotting those dandelions and getting rid of them, applying some ruthless weed killer to them. Let me give you an example. This is from Stephen King's novel The Stand in 1978. Have a look at it with me. This is at a point where a car has crashed. This is right at the beginning of the story. A car has crashed with a family inside, and the family are all dead from this horrible plague virus. Their eyes bulged sightlessly. Stu had been in the war, but he had never seen anything so terribly pitiful as this. His eyes were constantly drawn back to those linked hands. He and Vic backed away together and looked blankly at each other. Then they turned to the station. They could see Hap jawing frantically into the payphone. Now look at that text with me. Their eyes bulged sightlessly. That I think I will allow as an adverb. Occasionally an adverb is so good you just have to let it in and let it stay. Their eyes bulge sightlessly. I've tried to find a better way of saying that without an adverb, and I can't. So bravo, Stephen King. But the rest of them have to go. Stu had been in the war, but he had never seen anything so terribly pitiful as this. You can cross out terribly. Pitiful is fine on its own. His eyes were constantly drawn back to those linked hands. Cross out constantly and just say his eyes kept going back to those linked hands or kept looking at those linked hands. He and Vic backed away together and looked blankly at each other. Just say stared at each other. Then they turned to the station. They could see Hap jawing frantically. Jawing contains the note of frantically. So just say jawing into the payphone. So you can see from there, 1978, Stephen King was using a lot of adverbs. So the point I'm making is that you can grow over time, and as a writer you can learn to use the craft of writing in a much more disciplined, refined and elegant way. And Stephen King clearly reveals that to us by using a lot of adverbs in 1978 and then telling us to avoid them in the year 2000. So what I want to do as I wrap this up is just to encourage you when you write your stories, when you write your memoir or your poetry or your screenplay or whatever it is that you're writing, to do one of two things: to self-edit while you're writing, and every time you see an adverb, make sure you get rid of it. So right from the word go, as you write your book, I want to encourage you to have your adverb antennae on at maximum strength. And every time you use an adverb, to ask the question, is this really necessary? Am I telling rather than showing? Is there a stronger verb that I can use that makes the adverb redundant? Or if that's not your kind of style and modus operandi, then the second way I encourage you to be ruthless with adverbs is when you finish the first draft of your book, to go to the top of the toolbar, top of the page if you're using Microsoft Word, hit the word home, click on home, and then go over, swing over to the right-hand side at the top, find the word find, click on find, and then when you see the search bar, just enter the two letters LY and search, or the search will reveal every single instance of a word ending in LY in your book. And then you can go through meticulously and be ruthless in whether you want to keep or get rid of those words. Not long ago, a friend of mine, a next-door neighbour called Eleanor, who'd been wrestling with cancer for 20 years, told me that she had written a book of poems and that she wanted me to edit those poems and help her to publish them. Because she was a friend, I said I'd do it for free. And in the process of helping Eleanor to publish her reflections on living with cancer, I spotted that many of her poems had a lot of adverbs in them. So I said to her, let's cut out all the adverbs and find tighter ways of expressing your thoughts, because as somebody once said, poetry is the best words in the best order, etc. So she took this to heart and started cutting out adverbs, and then ended up by writing a poem entitled For Mark, in which she talked about cutting out adverbs. So let's have a look at that poem together now. My mentor has sternly warned me that adverbs are not my friends. In fact, he kindly sent a link to an eloquently written article which firmly states that there is virtually no place for them. Indeed, it angrily claimed the road to hell is paved with adverbs. One might even say diabolically paved. Additionally, he thoughtfully sent a copy of a letter latterly posted in 1956 by C.S. Lewis to someone prosaically called Joan. In it, Lewis cleverly outlines 5 steps to good writing. These tips helpfully boil down to roughly: don't beat continually about the bush, or use an unnecessary multitude of words, especially ones that are elaborate or flamboyant, nor be obtuse, indirect, off-centre, or hyperbolic. This timely, wise and welcome intervention has been incredibly helpful in effectively enabling me to assiduously avoid unwanted use of adverbs and to completely eradicate them from my work. What do you honestly think? How am I doing so far? I wonder if you noticed how many adverbs Eleanor used. Now, in this video, we've looked at how to improve our writing immediately. And immediately, of course, is an adverb. That's intentional too. And the answer is by cutting out our adverbs. So I want to encourage you to do that. The Puritan preacher and teacher and writer called Joseph Hall once made the statement, God loveth adverbs. You probably wondered when there'll be a faith element or a Christian element to this video. Well, it's right here at the very end. God loveth adverbs. Now, I know what Joseph Hall was trying to say, but I just want you to know that I don't think he really does. Even though God really does love how we do a task, which is what I think Joseph Hall was trying to get at, I think in writing, adverbs are by and large perilous, dangerous words, and we should avoid them. So it's not just a case in the Christian Storyteller channel that we want to write radiantly. I think also we want to write brilliantly. Radiant content, yes, but brilliant craft. And one of the ways we can do that is by cutting down on those deadly dandelions that are adverbs. Hope you found this helpful. If you have, please hit the subscribe button. Share this with your friends who are writers. Please hit the like button too. And I look forward to speaking to you again.